It's so wonderful to just be there when the person's like eating the peach that you grew and they're like, wow, this is the best peach I have ever had. It's hard to beat that feeling.
That's peach farmer Gwen Cameron, and we're going to be hearing from her on today's podcast. You're listening to Down to Earth, the Planet to Plate podcast, a co-production of the Radio Cafe and Quivira Coalition. We'll be back after these quick announcements. High Country News is a nonprofit, reader-supported publication that has been covering the West's land and communities for more than 50 years. Go to hcn.org/trial to get 2 print issues and 60 days of digital access to all of HCN's reporting for free. That's hcn.org/trial. And if you're enjoying this show, consider tuning in to Quivira's other podcast, Regeneration Rising. Host Taylor Mulia of the New Agrarian Program interviews innovative beginning farmers and ranchers to inspire the next generation of land stewards. Topics range from business to relationships to lifestyle and more. Just search Regeneration Rising in your podcast app. And now to our program. I'm very happy to welcome Gwen Cameron. She's owner and farmer at Rancho Durazno in Palisade, Colorado. Welcome to Down to Earth.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you are growing organic fruit. Durazno means peach in Spanish. You're also growing all kinds of other fruits too. Tell us a bit about your farm.
Yeah, we're a medium-sized organic farm. Our acreage totals 40 acres. As you said, most of that is in peaches. And then we also grow nectarines, plums, pluots, sweet cherries, Charente melons, apricots.
And you're doing it organically and producing a lot. I mean, many, many tons of fruit each year. What's the land like?
We're kind of situated, it's very deserty, more deserty than I think most people would expect who aren't familiar with the western slope of Colorado. It's a very arid landscape, but with the exception of thousands of cubic feet per second of water flowing down the Colorado River, which is just down the hill from our farm. So that's how we irrigate our crops, and that's how we are able to grow fruit in such abundance in an arid landscape.
So you are in the process of taking over the farm from your dad. Tell us, first of all, how the farm got founded, and then I'd love to hear about the process of succession.
Yeah, so my dad first arrived in Palisade in the late 1970s. He had just come back from the Vietnam War and was not really sure what his next move was. And his dad suggested, there's an article in the Denver Post that was like, Palisade fruit farms need peach pickers. And his dad was like, why don't you go get a job over there? So he hitchhiked to Palisade and was dropped off at a gas station. And one of the next trucks that pulled up, he just walked up and said, hey, do you need a peach picker? Do you know anyone who needs a peach picker? And they said, I need a peach picker. And that's actually the farm that we currently continue to farm to this day. So he just happened to run into somebody who needed a peach picker, started working on their farm seasonally, got curious about what happens on the farm the rest of the year. So started living and farming in Palisade year round. Then in the early 80s, my parents were able to buy their first little piece of orchard of their own and kind of grow the farm from there.
Now, did they buy out the person who he was working for before?
They bought out, their very first piece was the neighbor, and then over time they were able to acquire more pieces. And sort of the funny thing is that, we are in one of the prime locations in this valley for growing peaches. We're right up against Tibet Canyon, where we have a warm wind coming out that protects our crops in the springtime. And my dad didn't know any of that when he started farming here. He just loved that we have these cliffs and slopes above our farms, and every once in a while a big rock tumbles down. So there are these large boulders in the orchard, and he just thought that was so cool and beautiful and decided to stay. But little did he know, it's one of the most consistent places you can produce fruit crop here in Palisade and in Colorado as a whole.
That's amazing. Just because of the canyon?
The reason it's consistent is its location in relation to Tibet Canyon. So we have a phenomenon called an adiabatic wind, where you have a air mass flowing downhill as it cools in the evening. The mass that causes that is the Rocky Mountains. So as the air cools in the evening, it flows downhill as it goes through Tibet Canyon, those molecules move around and warm up. So as it's exiting Tibet Canyon, they're a few degrees warmer than the ambient temperature. And that couple degrees can make the difference between having a crop and not having one.
Because of the frost in the spring?
Because of the frost in the spring, yeah.
Very interesting. So he farmed for many years. Did you grow up on the farm?
Yes, I grew up on the farm.
And did you know you always wanted to do that, or did you kind of leave and start your life elsewhere and come back?
I didn't think of the farm as a career when I was growing up. I loved growing up on a farm. I spent my whole childhood eating fruit and climbing trees and driving tractors and getting into all sorts of fun trouble. But I love to write, and I went to school for journalism and did that as a career. And it wasn't until my dad kind of came to me in 2014 or so and said, hey, I'm ready-ish to be done. If you want to do this, I'll teach you. Let me know. And I took some time to think about it and then decided to make the leap, quit my dream job, and move back across the country to start farming. And it was very much that. It was very much kind of a leap of faith, because while I grew up on the farm and I, generally saw what it was like, I didn't know how to farm. I didn't know if I would like it. It was scary because you can't really dabble in taking over a family business, especially a farm, when it's your family's both career, but also home and family business. And so I really wanted to be sure that I would love it and would do it for a long time, but I couldn't be sure until I tried it. So I kind of lucked out, and I love it, and I'll continue to do it.
Just out of curiosity, what was your dream job?
I was working for a very, very small publishing company called Height of Land Publishing. They produce Backcountry Magazine, Alpinist Magazine. Alpinist is who I was working for at the time. It's a quarterly print magazine that's focused on alpine style climbing.
Interesting. So then you came back and you started learning the business and the science and basically every piece of farming. And I guess you did pretty much every job there was to be done on the farm.
Yeah, when I came back, and this is my 10th year, so that was almost 10 years ago now. I just started on the field crew because both my dad and I felt that I needed to know how to do every job on the farm really well if I'm going to be running the farm and telling other people how to do that same job. So I started on the field crew, and then through the years, I moved up to be the field crew leader, and then started taking on kind of bigger picture roles like irrigating the orchard, nutrient management, that kind of thing, and then taking over kind of the bigger and bigger business decision making as we went along. So this year, I make most decisions on the farm. My dad's, we call him 95% retired, but I still definitely get his opinion a lot because I'm just so fortunate and so aware that I have this person who has like 50 years of experience doing this thing that I'm trying to do, and he's available and willing and excited to sit down and talk through different decisions I'm trying to make. So I definitely lean on him a lot and really enjoy that working relationship with him.
What are some of the interesting, difficult, challenging decisions that you have to make at a peach farm?
Oh my gosh, so many. So many, and they're so varied. I mean, that's what's interesting about farming is the challenges that come up are different every single year. For example, this year, something we've dealt with that we haven't really dealt with to the same extent in previous years is these huge wind and rainstorms that we've had. We've had, an inch of rain falling at a time, multiple times throughout the month of June, which for us is a lot of rain. We get like 7 inches of moisture per year total. That combination of wind and rain has been really tough on our cherry crop. It makes the cherries more delicate, and then they kind of blow around and bump against each other. And then when they come in from the field, they already have bruising. Some of them may already have mold from hanging outside, damaged. So that has been very tough and time consuming to figure out what to do with that crop and how much time to put into picking and packing and sorting it, because it's already such a labor intensive crop to grow.
Even
so
under
that's a
normal
challenge.
circumstances.
Even under normal circumstances. Yeah, it's not very cold hardy. So like this is our orchard is 15 years old. This is our third crop that we've been able to produce in that time. So they're not very cold hardy and they're very time consuming. I mean, when you think about it, it takes about the same amount of time to pick 2 cherries as it does a half-pound peach. So it's the amount of time to harvest and get them off the tree is considerable, and then the amount of time packing is also pretty considerable. Some other examples of challenges that have come up in the years that I've been farming are fires in 2020 that created some air quality issues for our crew, and it also created a lot of road closures. So I'm on the western half of the state. Almost all of my fruit and all of my customers are on the eastern half of the state. And so we're driving several times a week in between our farm and the Front Range of Colorado. And so those fires and road closures from mudslides that were a result of the fires added many, many hours to every drive that we took to deliver our fruit to the Front Range. I mean, I could go on. The challenges are numerous and varied and tough. And you know, a lot of the time my dad has seen it before and has great advice. And there's still a lot of times where he's like, well, I've never seen that before. So we just figure it out. And the next time that challenge comes up, we know a little bit more how to deal with it.
I mean, it sounds like this last set of things is directly or indirectly a result of climate change.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been surprised by how quickly and dramatically I've seen the impacts of climate change on my farm, from those wildfires affecting our ability to deliver our fruit to the Front Range, to those heavy winds and rains that we experienced this June were the result of Hurricane Alberto. We've also had frosts at a severity and time of year that is unusual. In 2020, we had a fairly normal Colorado fall, but then the temperatures dropped to 16 degrees before the trees had time to acclimate to those low temperatures. And as a result, we lost about 3,000 young trees that we had just planted that year and saw damage to 50% of the remaining trees on the farm. And that impacted us both in that we then have to pay to replant those trees over again. But it also impacts us in the lost crops that we don't have from those trees that by 2024 should have been in close to full production.
Yeah. Those kinds of things, I mean, I can't even imagine the emotional impact besides having to make the practical decisions. It must be a kind of like emotional roller coaster.
Yes, it definitely can be. I feel a lot of pressure to make it all work, to sell all the fruit so that I can pay all the paychecks, because we're not a huge farm, but I have about 20 employees that are relying on me for a paycheck. And so I feel a lot of pressure to solve those issues and make sure we're still able to produce the fruit and get it to the customers that are expecting it as well.
Well, let's talk about the workers. I mean, your father showed up at a gas station once and said, "I'm here to pick." I'm guessing that's not how you get workers now.
No, it's not. And I don't think many people do these days, but our field crew comes from Mexico through the H-2A visa program. It's a federal visa program that's specifically targeted towards providing jobs for agricultural workers on a temporary basis. So my crew arrives at the beginning of February and stays through the end of October. They spend the rest of the year back in Sonora, Mexico with their families. My packing crew is a mix of U.S. residents some of whom are here year-round, some of whom are residents here, but also spend some of their time back in their home countries as well.
So you're part of something called the Fair Food Program, and I'd never heard of that until you and I were talking about it the other day. Talk about what that is. It's an innovative and interesting model for buyers, workers, and farmers.
Yeah, so it's that model is called a worker-driven social responsibility initiative. And what that means is essentially workers, and this program started in the tomato fields of Florida. So a group of workers kind of came together and set a certain standard that they would like to see from their employers. Farmers involved in the program commit to adhering to those standards, or their code of conduct, as they call it. And then they also incorporate the participation of the buyers of that produce that's being produced on a fair food farm.
The buyers being like the retail outlets.
Yeah, and retail outlets or many of the buyers involved in the Fair Food Program are actually fast food restaurants. So yeah, the Fair Food Program involves the participation of 3 different groups: the farm workers, the farmers, and the buyers. Each one of those groups has incentives built into the program, benefits built into the program, and they also have accountability built into the program, which I think is what makes Fair Food stand out from other programs that kind of purport to ensure the fair treatment of agricultural workers as well, is that accountability piece, and especially the participation of the buyers, not just the farmers and the workers. So the Fair Food participating buyers agree to buy from Fair Food farms before they source that same product from another farm who is not part of the Fair Food program. The buyers also pay a premium per pound to help ensure good, fair pay for the workers, and that premium gets passed directly to the workers themselves. The farmer gets that market incentive of having Fair Food participating buyers who are required to purchase from that farm. And then they also agree to adhere to that code of conduct.
What is that code of conduct?
As they like to say, 95% of it is just the law. So in part, they are enforcing local, state, and federal laws. And then they also, in some areas, set a higher standard than the law. For example, Colorado has pretty good heat stress protections for agricultural workers, but Fair Food goes a step further, and our workers take a break every 2 hours from April through October, whereas the state law is more dependent upon temperature. So that's just, it's kind of getting into the details there. But Fair Food, essentially, most of it is in enforcing the laws that already exist, but then there are also these additional requirements. Some other examples are a monthly health and safety meeting that we have with our workers to check in and find out if there are any issues they're having affecting their health or safety. It creates kind of that more formalized communication pathway between the employer and the workers, things like that.
Now, what are some of the things you learn in those meetings?
You know, I have a pretty good communication with my workers already. I think I've benefited some from kind of the formalization involved in the Fair Food program, but I speak conversational Spanish and am able to communicate pretty well with my crew, and have always kind of made time and made sure I'm checking in with everybody and finding out if there are any issues in the housing units, repairs that need to happen, anything like that. So functionally, we haven't made any great changes to what we're doing under the Fair Food program, but it has helped us so far. It has helped us do a better job of telling our story and kind of describing in a shorthand the practices that we have on our farm and around treating our workers well.
You know, I was thinking about that in relation to, like, I knew a guy who worked at a corporation where they were like, we want to hear your input. And then when you gave it, you got fired, or, you know, you got marginalized or not promoted or whatever, because they didn't really want to hear it. They just wanted to sort of make a show of it. You know, those things, the success really rests on some level on trust between the owner and the workers.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust is really critical, but also failing that, I think the Fair Food still functions well because they are kind of this objective third party that is enforcing those rules. So they have a 24-hour hotline that workers can call to make a complaint that can be about their supervisor, about the farm that they're working for, and it's completely anonymous. The farms that participate in Fair Food also do commit to non-retaliation when anybody makes a complaint or suggestion. And then the Fair Food program, once they receive that complaint through the hotline, works with the grower to fact find and make sure they're getting the whole picture, but then come up with a solution for improvement. So it's kind of a continual improvement model. And I think something that really one aspect of the Fair Food Program that I think makes it work well is that I don't pay the Fair Food Program to come audit me. That's an inherent bias that's kind of built into some similar certification, like our organic certification, our food safety certification. I'm paying the certifying body to come tell me I'm doing a good job. And not to say they're not coming in and pointing out problems if they see them, but I really like, especially when it has to do with, human rights, I really like that the Fair Food Program doesn't owe me anything and is totally objective in their enforcement of the code of conduct.
So do the workers, in your view, or from what you've observed, do they like it? Do they feel that it's a part of their work life that represents them well?
They do like it. Yeah, I actually, after I first learned about the Fair Food Program, I invited them out to our farm where they kind of did their entry audit to kind of just see where we are as a farm, see if we meet the initial standards for entry into the program. After that visit, and they spoke with the workers as part of that visit, after the visit, I held a vote among my workers to ask them whether they wanted to participate in the program. Because I really didn't want to say, hey, I'm doing this thing for you. We're going to join this program. And then they don't want it or they're not interested in it. It's the whole concept behind Fair Food is that it's a worker-driven initiative. And so I wanted our farm's participation in that to also be supported by the workers that it's intending to benefit. So I held a vote, and after getting a few questions answered that the crew had about the program, it was a unanimous yes.
Very interesting. Now, when you go to, I know Whole Foods is a participant in the Fair Food Program. When you go, let's say, to Whole Foods, is the Fair Food labeled? Like, does the customer buying it know that it's a part of that program?
Not currently, and that's something I definitely like to see more of, because I think customers have become more and more interested in how farm workers are treated on the farms that are producing their food. Currently, there's not a lot of advertisement of participation in the Fair Food Program, but I would definitely like to see more in the future.
It's interesting because, part of what makes it fair is something that you hear farmers talking about all the time, which is it's hard to get a good price for your production, for what you are producing as a farmer. And, middlemen and distributors and people who are processing food are making money and the farmers aren't. This is a way that money actually goes back to the farms by establishing a price that is good enough that you can actually pay your workers what they're worth.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the Fair Food Program was born out of. The workers from the tomato fields in Florida were protesting for better wages, and they weren't getting very far, and they realized, hey, my employer can't afford to pay me more unless they're getting paid more. So we need to get the participation of the buyers, not just the farmers, if we want to change the system and improve conditions for workers.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you go and spend a little more per pound on peaches, it's going where it's supposed to be going, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So your farm recently hosted Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack for the announcement of the USDA's new Farm Labor Stabilization and Protection pilot. You're one of the farms to be chosen for that. What's that all about?
Yeah, that's a grant that we received recently, and that event was, the announcement of that grant. That program exists to do a couple different things. It exists to encourage the creation of jobs for people coming from the Northern Triangle countries, which are Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. So you could, through this grant program, your application would receive preference if you're willing to recruit through the H-2A program workers from those countries, and or if you are willing to commit to a better standard of treatment for your workers through a worker-driven social responsibility program. So when that grant was announced, I was very excited because I'm already part of a worker-driven social responsibility initiative with the Fair Food Program. So that's how I came to apply. What we'll be doing with that funding is Two things. One, I've created a health care support plan where each worker receives a medical fund that they can spend on behavioral health, visits to the dentist, any medical related expense that they incur. They'll receive a sliding scale discount from a local clinic that serves an uninsured population. And we'll also host an on-farm clinic where my workers will see a primary care provider once a year. And then the other piece of that grant is to improve our housing in a way that the workers are advocating for. So essentially, when they arrive next February, we'll get together and have a meeting, and they'll brainstorm improvements they want to see to the housing units. So for example, right now the houses are cooled with evaporative coolers. And if they want to upgrade to AC, each of my 2 housing units has a fund that they're able to use for those improvements that they themselves vote on.
It's interesting. Healthcare is so much less expensive in Mexico. Do you have to spend those dollars for healthcare in the U.S. or can they spend it back at home?
They can spend it back at home. The only requirement that I've put on spending those funds are that they're used for a medical bill. So It's up to them. One of the reasons I wanted to create that medical fund and kind of chose to go that way with my grant application was that because medical care is so expensive here, a lot of my workers either do not seek medical care when they need it, or they don't seek it until it's an emergency, and then they're going to the emergency room and it's much more expensive, or they're traveling back to Mexico where it's much less expensive to access care. And in that time, one, it's a lot longer before they see a provider, but also they're missing work. So they're missing those wages in addition to having to wait and then for the purpose of paying a lower medical bill. So I wanted to create a fund that would allow them to make medical decisions for themselves that was just about their medical needs and not about the cost of that care.
Very interesting. Now, is that something that you came up with? Is that something that's being replicated on other farms?
That's something I came up with. There were a few different categories of a few different practices that you could choose from. It was kind of like an a la carte menu. But one of those options is to kind of come up with your own proposal. And so that's what that medical fund was a need that I saw among my workers on my farm. And so I decided to propose that in addition to the housing improvement plan, which is based off of one of those a la carte items, but I added some elements to it.
Very interesting. It's such a great idea. Other farmer listeners take note. Maybe it'll spread to other farmers. I mean, are you in touch with, are there, organic orchard associations that you're part of? Do you talk to each other? People who are doing similar kind of work that you do?
Yeah, we absolutely talk to each other. The way I first got involved with Fair Food Program was through the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. There was a group of us that kind of were interested in worker-driven social responsibility initiative, and we started researching the different options, and through that, Fair Food was the clear kind of winner. It was the most well-respected. We thought it did the best job, and so that's how I came to be involved with Fair Food. So Rocky Mountain Farmers Union is absolutely one of them.
So does everyone on the farm speak Spanish?
Everyone on the farm speaks Spanish. It's our common language. Even Jean-Francois, who's a native French speaker, is engaged to a Mexican-American woman and speaks excellent Spanish. So I'm really proud of that. Everyone on the farm is able to communicate well to each other, and I think it's one of our strengths.
Let's go back to talking about your dad. You're taking over the farm. He's mostly retired, but he still offers a lot of, offers advice when needed. What's that like for you and for him, for your relationship, for him to be sort of stepping away as you step in?
He's sort of, throughout this succession process, I've been really impressed with his ability to let go. I think that's something that often older generations struggle with when passing along a farm. This is something that's been your baby, your career, your life's work for decades, and then suddenly someone else is making the decisions and is in control of the fate of that thing. That's really scary. But since the beginning, he's been very willing to let me make my own decisions and mistakes and make changes to what we're doing, and has always been really supportive. And I think that's why our succession has gone so well, is his understanding that he's not trying to take the thing he built and continue it into the future. He's taking the thing that he built and he's passing it on to someone who's going to make their own decisions moving forward.
I mean, I think it becomes tricky when the young generation wants to make really big changes, do regenerative agriculture where the parents were involved with conventional and a lot of spraying and inputs and stuff. And then the kids are like, no, we don't want to do that. I'm sort of getting the sense that it's kind of more of a smooth transition in basically the same vein that you're talking about at Rancho Durazno.
Yeah, exactly. I think in part we're really lucky because I think he does a really great job in terms of how we produce our fruit. We do it with a lot of thought and integrity and care for soil health and people. And I really like the way he farms. So yes, I've made some changes along the way and I take a different approach because I'm a different person, but kind of the core of what we're doing is very much the same as the way that my dad farmed this land.
Talk about some of the things that you're actually doing on the farm. I mean, you're in an irrigated kind of semi-arid desert terrain. How are you dealing with insects? Are you doing cover crops? Are you doing compost?
Yeah, we do cover crop to help both to put nutrients back into our soil, but also to create a habitat for both beneficial insects and non-beneficial insects. We mow every other row of that cover crop so that there's always a habitat for the insects to move to. We found that if we mow everything all at once, it kind of pushes that insect population up into the trees, and sometimes even insects that are normally beneficial become harmful when they're up in the tree, damaging the fruit and the leaves. So we leave every other row when we're mowing. We irrigate with micro sprinklers for efficiency. It's also the way the tree likes to uptake water the most, kind of a slow and steady moistening of the soil rather than kind of the old school way of flood irrigating or irrigating with gated pipe. And then, we absolutely compost. We use pelletized feather meal for some of our nutrient needs. All sorts of practices. It's a complex system.
I mean, we hear so much about the way that big agriculture gets subsidized and so-called specialty crops or things that aren't kind of like corn, soy, wheat, and so on don't necessarily get the funding from the government that they might need. What happens if you have like a really bad year where there are catastrophic weather events or whatever? Do you have that backup from the government?
Yeah, our crop insurance is subsidized by the government, so we pay for a crop insurance policy. The policy we pay for doesn't help us unless we've lost more than 40% of our crop, so like a pretty drastic loss, but that's a policy that we carry every year. And then there's also a program through the Farm Service Agency called NAP that helps us to insure some of the crops that aren't insurable by a standard crop insurance program.
And that actually works. I mean, it's a functional thing.
It is mostly functional. There are some places for improvement. For example, the assumed price for an organic cherry sold at wholesale is not the same as the actual price that we are seeing for an organic cherry at wholesale. There's a bit of a gap that it's a little bit, some of those crops that we cover are a little bit undervalued. So it's not functioning entirely in the way that it's designed, but we're still glad to have it. And it definitely helps us continue year by year.
Now, you were talking about distribution before. Who actually is buying your food, buying your fruit?
Yeah, so we, as a medium-sized farm, we kind of do a little bit of everything. So we sell to larger wholesale buyers like Whole Foods and other grocery stores or restaurant service businesses, but we also sell our fruit direct through farmers markets across Colorado.
So do you do that to basically diversify your risk so you don't have all your peaches in one basket, so to speak?
Yeah, exactly. It allows us to not lean too hard on any one customer or any one type of customer. It allows us to get the best price for our product where we can, But then when we need to move large volumes of fruit with those larger wholesale buyers, because peaches, and the rest of the things we grow don't have a very long shelf life. I'm trying to, before the fruit's even picked, I'm trying to anticipate what we have so that I can sell it and put it on a truck, ideally within 5 days of harvest. So I need to constantly adapt to what's coming out of the orchard and what we're packing to make sure we're staying ahead of that volume.
One of the things that got talked about so much during and after the COVID lockdown was how the food system was not, basically big ag turns out to be not resilient, whereas small and medium ag really was able to kind of meet the challenge of a whole new system during lockdown. What was your experience during that time?
We saw increased attendance at farmers markets, which was great to see. We were really concerned that those would totally nosedive. We didn't see a big decrease in sales through grocery stores either. So generally it helped our fruit sales, and we didn't see the big kind of crash that, like you said, larger scale farms experienced during COVID.
I have to ask you, what do you do with your fruit? Like, do you eat fruit all year round? Do you make pies? Like, what's your own eating habit?
Yeah, I think the best peach is just a fresh one right off the tree. That's pretty much how I eat them, almost exclusively, in part because I think it's the best way to eat a peach. But I also have no time. I don't have time to bake. I don't have time to slice peaches and freeze them for later or bake cookies. We're just, dawn to dusk when it's harvest time, really, really busy. So when I do eat tasty baked goods they're made by my neighbors or friends who take my fruit and do something fun with it. But otherwise, I just eat a lot of peaches fresh off the tree, in part because it's my job, but I also happen to love them.
What are your winters like? What do you do after the harvest is over?
So things slow down quite a bit in the off season, but not entirely. In the fall, we pull out any orchards that have gotten old and not as productive, and we're ready to fallow and then prepare them for planting again. So we'll pull out old orchards. That's when we apply compost to kind of help the trees recover from that year's crop. And then in the wintertime is when we start pruning. So making sure that the tree is renewing its branches to produce the best quality fruit, and also making sure we have good light distribution all the way from the top of the tree down to the bottom. And then, winter is also when we're catching up on bookkeeping and planning for the year ahead and quite a bit of office work. So it's not completely slow. We're still fairly busy, but it's not quite the same level of go as harvest time is.
So you've been doing this for 10 years and it really turns out to be the thing that you want to do and that you love. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned as a farmer over that time? That's a good chunk of time.
Gosh, some of the lessons I've learned are know when to stop picking. There were a couple years where I just felt that every peach that I produced had to come off the tree and had to be sold. And if I didn't achieve that, I have failed. And sometimes, the market doesn't support that, or it's been 103 degrees for a week straight and the fruit is just ripening faster than you can pick and pack it. And that's just not the reality. So that's a hard lesson that I'm still learning, but an important one. I've learned that for me, quality is more important than anything, both in terms of what the customer wants to see from me, but also I want to grow the peach that I want to eat, right? And I farm better and I sell my fruit better if I love the thing that I'm producing. So I put a really big emphasis on quality and getting that feedback from customers and incorporating that feedback into what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you actually hear from customers?
Oh, all sorts of ways. My phone number's on the website, so sometimes they find me there. Individual farmers market customers call me and they tell me about the great peach they had, or maybe an issue they found, and we talk through it. So I talk, one-on-one on the phone to individual customers, to big buyers, all sorts. We get emails all the time that are kind of like, oh, this is the best peach I've ever had. And gosh, that's one of the most important pieces of it, is like you work your butt off to produce this thing. And I think it's so wonderful to just be there when the person's like eating the peach that you grew and they're like, wow, this is the best peach I have ever had. It's hard to beat that feeling, and to really feel that all of that hard work is worth it.
Gwen Cameron is owner and farmer at Rancho Durazno. They're on the web at ranchodurazno.com. That's ranchodurazno.com. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Down to Earth. We would love it if you would support this program, which you can do by going to patreon.com/down-to-earth planet to plate, where you can sign up for as little as $3. Patreon is Patreon. And also please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. The Quivira Coalition is a not-for-profit and a community network of ranchers, farmers, conservationists, scientists, educators, and many others dedicated to regenerative practices that produce healthy food, support meaningful livelihoods, sustain biodiversity, and remedy the impacts of climate change. To learn more about Quivira and how you can support their work, visit quiviracoalition.org, Quivira. And finally, this show is a production with the Radio Cafe. You can check out radiocafe.org to hear back episodes of this show and also find all kinds of other shows on a wide variety of topics as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.